Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge and welcome to another recommendations video. And today I have some recommendations for you that I think are really going to work for you, especially if you like your heroes to be a little less knight in shining armor and a little more down and dirty possessive type. So recently I had done a possessive heroes recommendation. I know that that's been super popular right now, and I'd say that most of the heroes I'm about to talk about in this one are part of that as well, but we're taking just a different angle this time, and we're going to do morally gray heroes slash characters in the book, because some of these, the women are just as, you know, morally corrupt as the men are. This is a bit of a sliding scale because we do have like some historicals on here where, you know, the hero is probably not at the same level as some of the, you know, mafia, kingpin, or vampires that I have on my list. But it's a sliding scale. You know, there's something for everybody on here. But if you like your heroes to dabble on the dark side, this is going to be the one for you. So let's go ahead and dive in. And first, I have one that is actually, like I usually do, the inspiration for this video, and that's going to be Mercy by Deborah Anastasia. This was a recommendation that I saw on Bree from In Love and Words channel, and she had got the rec from someone else. But I will say that I had thought this book was going to be even like darker than it was, just kind of based on this cover. And don't get me wrong, it is still pretty dark, but what I mean by it not being as dark as I thought is that the hero is this cinnamon roll assassin, okay? And what do I mean by that? I mean that we have our hero who is from a very abusive family, and when he was young, his father murdered his mother and was actually planning to kill him too. And I can't quite remember like where they were at, but he was out with his father, and his father was like yanking on him and pulling him, and this little girl came up and literally put herself between the father and son and told him to stop picking on this little boy. And that stuck with this little boy, and it actually gave him the courage to run away from his father, who he knew was planning to hurt him. And so for 15 years, this young man, who's called Mercy in his professional world, which will tell you what well, I've already said he's an assassin, but his name is Phoenix, spelled F-E-N-I-X, like Phoenix Fox, you know, but he's called Nix, which, you know, that is an appropriate name for a killer as well. And he watches out for this girl. Her name is Becca, and he watches out for her just a little too much, we might say, in the fact that he is stalking her to do that. But from his side, it's always from the point of view of he likes to protect certain women. And when we first see him in his capacity as like an assassin, he was actually hired by this mafia boss to rescue his granddaughter, who his granddaughter isn't a part of the life because his son had married this woman and they were like out of the life. But the bad guys still wanted to use the granddaughter as leverage. And so our hero, we meet him when he goes to rescue this little girl. Now, the other thing about Phoenix is that he has tattoos over his entire body, and he actually has a skeleton tattooed over himself, because if people are going to look at him, he wanted them to look at him in fear instead of look at him for other things. So he's damaged in that way. And he first interacts with our heroine like where she knows she's interacting with him when she's working at this bar for a celebration around like the Day of the Dead, and he's able to go out in public and like show himself because it looks like he's just done really cool makeup for Day of the Dead. But anyway, that was enough explanation for one book. You guys know I like to keep these a little shorter, but most of the rest of the books I'm going to talk about I've recommended, you know, many times before, so I don't have to talk as long about them. But this is on KU. I also listened to the audiobook for it. And there's 3 books in this series. I haven't continued it, but I assume they're about some of the other people that we meet in this one. But I really enjoyed this. Then I actually have like a new adult rec, which I don't recommend too many of those. Y'all know this. But this is by an author that her new adult books actually really impressed me. So this is Bright Like Midnight by Wolfe. And this is actually gonna maybe surprise people because our hero in this one is a drug dealer. Him and his brother, they are responsible for some drugs being dealt in this area around this college. The series is called Savage You. And our heroine, she has gotten herself in a sticky situation she was dating a guy who is getting into trouble with the hero and his brother. And as payment to get the guy to behave, she trades herself to be at his like beck and call. So he actually forces her to be like, she thinks that he's going to force her to do more like sexual things for him, which she actually kind of wants to have her choice taken away. So there's that little bit of aspect in it, but you would never know because she seems like such this like sweet, soft-spoken girl, and really she has some kind of deep desires here, and she believes that this hero could fulfill them for her. But he, you know, isn't as morally corrupt as she's thinking that he is, because he ends up more having her, like, after her classes and stuff, like, be a maid in his house instead of other things. But I mean, obviously it leads to other things. I don't know, I just really like this. You know how I say, like, I don't really like there to be drugs in my books, but there aren't like consumption of it by the main characters. That's more of what I don't really like to read. So I really enjoyed this one. Then we have a book I've been talking about nonstop, and I will keep talking about because I just love what this author is doing with this series. I do think the series gets better as we go, but this is the Immortal Coven series by Amara Ray. The first book is Lifeblood. This one is fated mates between a witch who is a life witch, which means she can like heal people. These covens, they have 6 witches in them to be a like full coven, and each witch has like a different power that they possess. And our heroine Colette, she has healing powers, but in the beginning of this book, there is a fight between this warlock coven and the witch coven, and this witch coven that is part of it, the coven that we're following through this series, they are actually hybrid witches, and they are not very well liked by witch kind as a whole because their mothers all had children with like, you know, they're all half-breeds, so they've banded together in this way. But yeah, our heroine ends up getting kidnapped by the warlocks, and our hero, Mackay, it's his job to torture and get information from her. And when he realizes that she is his mate, he's like, oh, well, I'll still continue to torture her like I'm supposed to, but then I can have her when I'm done. And the more he is forced to torture her to try to get information, the more that it is just, he's realizing that's not who he wants to be. And I really like this. I also like who Mackay becomes for the rest of the series, but there's definitely a lot of trigger warnings in this as well. And the author does put them right at the front, so know that. But there is some like blood play that happens in here. There is violence and sexual assault, but not by the hero. But there are still some that are a little bit like dubious consent, but because they're mates, it doesn't maybe like feel as dubious. Anyway, you'll see. These are dark, but if you love magic and you love that Fated Mates vibe, you get that here. There's Birdies Biker by Misty Walker. This is the series that I just dived into a couple months back, and the most recent one actually just came out. But this one that started it all, I was really impressed. Actually, I have a signed copy of the first one here. Let me see if I can find it. And it says, "You're in for a dirty ride." I really like that. I don't normally like biker books, but I really like this series because Misty doesn't go too heavy in the biker culture with the aspects I don't like. I don't really like people being called like club whores or bitches or all of these things. And while there is some of that in here, what I love about our heroine, Birdie, is that she didn't grow up with that. And so when she actually ends up under the protection of this biker gang and the boss, Loki, she's very much challenges a lot of those aspects. And Loki even says, like, I don't know why we call women bitches. That's just what we call the ladies. It's not a derogatory term. And she's like, calling me a bitch is derogatory, so please stop doing that. There's some light kinkiness going on in this one. Also, our heroine does get assaulted, not by the hero. It isn't graphically shown, but like we know what happens to her. And there's what I do really love, what I love about that, you know, is that we don't have to sit through all of the trauma. Like, you do have to sit through some of it. Again, she gets assaulted. We see part of the assault, but we don't have to see the whole thing. Is we don't have to viscerally live through that, but we do have to live through the healing process, which to me is more important. Like if I'm gonna see one thing, I'd rather see the healing process and see this like violent assault and then not see how we get our way out of it, you know? But yeah, I really do love this series, and particularly as someone who, like I said, biker books have been difficult for me, this one really worked. Then, like I said, now we have one that our hero is a little less on the scary side of it. Oh, this book was actually a gift too. I love when I discover that. This was from Candace. Thanks, Candace. I have The Devil is a Marquess by Elisa Brighton. So this is book 4 in her Rescue from Ruin series. These work best if you're reading them in order, but you don't have to read all of them, so you could jump around if you want. And this one is... I'll actually read some of the back for you because it's been a little while since I've read this one. But this is the Marquess of Rutherford, and so this is Benedict Chatham, and he has to marry for money. And then Miss Charlotte Lancaster, I think she's American. Is she American? I think she is. And like her father is kind of forcing her into... Oh no, so she's England, but she wants to live in America. That's what happened. And her father like kind of gets her in this arranged marriage and says like, if you can do it for a year, then I'll let you move to America and do what you want. And this seems very like Machiavellian of her father, but he does look out for her in certain ways because he is going to help, you know, he's going to be giving her dowry to Benedict, but he has some rules. He's like, you can't be drinking anymore and you need to like work on this yourself. And so because he's an alcoholic, he's been gambling, he's not well, you know, and he's not this great guy. And so it's very confusing for Charlotte because her father has married her off to this man who is a wreck. You know, it's like, why did you do this? And you know, Charlotte is determined to make a success of the home so that she can take what she wants and move to America. So, you know, there's also a like second level to the deal that I won't spoil, but it's part of what makes, you know, this hero is a little more morally ambiguous than some of the others in this series. And I think that Elisa Brighton writes complex heroes very well. And again, he's not on the same level as some of these other ones I've mentioned. I'm just, you know, there's just something about him, right? All right, onward we go. Twisted Love by Anna Wong. I feel like this one, I haven't recommended this book in a video really at all because there's other books in this series that I've recommended more. But, you know, the whole series is out now. You can binge all of them on KU for now. Anna Wong is actually getting a book deal with these, so they're going to be re-released, you know, like in the bookstores officially, which is pretty cool. Like, that's very exciting for her. TikTok does have its positives, right? But this one is a brother's best friend. So we have Alex Volkov, who is a devil blessed with the face of an angel. So there we go. There's that. He's a businessman, and he's also roommates with Ava's brother, Josh. Josh actually has a later book in the series, too. But Ava, it says, is a free spirit trapped in a nightmare. So this book specifically, it does have a few like darker themes. There are some triggers to look up for this from like childhood trauma. And there is something that Ava is very much repressing. But there ends up being a situation where they become like neighbors because he's like living next door to her. And her brother is away on like, I can't remember if it's an internship or just a trip where Josh is, but he's gone. And so Ava ends up wanting to see if she can make Alex like snap a little bit. He's a little bit of a sociopath, so there's that. And there is, like I said, a darker plan that he has in motion for getting revenge for something that happened in his past. So yeah, and Alex, he's willing to go to any lengths that he needs to make that happen. So yeah, I do recommend this series. The series was all 4 or 5 stars for me. I really loved it. But I feel like this one and the newest one have the most morally gray heroes. Reese from book 2 and Josh from book 3. There are some darker elements in those books. For the most part, they're more just contemporary, where this has a little bit darker elements. Then we have my favorite vampire. I mostly wanted this in a video because I just want to show off my beautiful hardcover that I got in Georgia whenever I can. I freaking love Lothair. This is book 10 in Kresley Cole's series, so I definitely understand if people don't want to jump in with this one, but Lothair is the enemy of old, Leo, as he's called by Elizabeth, but this book has a vampire who takes this mortal girl captive who he believes is the vessel of his mate. So, of course, I don't want to spoil anything, but also to kind of tease you into this, Lothair, like, everyone is supposed to have their, like, fated mate. And for vampires, I believe Lothair was a born vampire, because there are born vampires and there are made vampires, and he is a born vampire. And his entire family was ripped away from him many centuries ago, and he is bent on finding his vampire queen and then taking over the throne that's meant to be his. Like, he wants to take it back. And he has a very set plans that he's supposed to do. But what he doesn't expect is that his mate is a human. And he, of course, would never believe that the great Lothair would be cursed with a human mate, because to mate with a human, like, is disaster, because nobody has successfully turned a human woman in, like, recorded history. And there haven't been many vampire women born. So they can mate with other, your fated mate can be, any other species than you. Obviously, that's kind of what the whole series is his people mating with inconvenient people. That's how it works. But he mistakes the, young woman that he, imprints with as the demon queen that is inhabiting her. So he goes about finding a way to remove Elizabeth's soul from her body so that the vampire queen inhabiting it can become her. And the vampire queen knows that she's not his mate, but his aims go with hers, so why would she let him know that he's wrong? So there will be these times, though, where Elizabeth comes forward and I keep calling her vampire queen, like, the demon queen will, like, recess, and Elizabeth is terrified, and the things that the being inhabiting her body has made her hands do have left her very desperate. So at the very beginning of this book, it starts with Elizabeth has gotten herself onto death row, and she wants to be killed because she doesn't want her body to be able to hurt people anymore. And Lothair is extremely put out that she would try to ruin the body of his fated mate. So he kidnaps her and is going to keep her captive until he's able to shut her up forever. So what a conflicted story. Like, only Kresley Cole can set up characters where their aims are so completely cross from each other, but still give you an HEA in the end. And I said the other day on Instagram, I did a post about this book, of course, to show it off, and say that, like, this is actually a comfort read for me, which is just kind of crazy that such a, like, twisted story could be my comfort read. But number one, Robert Peckoff reads all of Kresley Cole's books, and they're amazing. So next, I have Stolen by a Sinner by Michelle Hurd. This is a morally gray hero because he's a mafia boss. He's the head of the Turkish mafia, and he wants to get revenge against the Polish mafia. And when he executes his plan, the boss that he's going after ends up getting away, and he's left with a captive whose name is Lara, and she is a maid. What he doesn't know, sorry that this is shiny, what he doesn't know is that she's actually been an indentured servant her whole life pretty much, and she has been abused and beaten and mistreated, and she has no loyalty to this man who is her boss / her owner. And so she actually ends up getting shot in the beginning in this invasion or whatever, and he takes her captive because he's expecting to, like, get information from her. Little does he know that she's this broken, sad woman, and he ends up giving her a job in his home, and slowly his whole household falls in love with her, and eventually he falls in love with her too. So this hero is morally gray because he's a mafia boss, but he's actually one of my favorite heroes I've read this year, but I figured I'd put him in this video because I can. So yeah, this is a bit of a Cinderella retelling as well, not like straight up, but the author put a lot of aspects into it. So this is book 3 in the Sinner series, but you can read these books out of order. They attach to each other by the smallest thread. But if you want to know, Taken by a Sinner is first, and then Owned by a Sinner is next, and then there's this one. And there's going to be 3 more books in the series, because each of these books is about a different head of a mafia, and they have this like brotherhood where they help each other out if they need it. Okay, then we have one other Mafia one I want to share, and this is Mafia Mistress by Mila Finelli. We know I've talked about this book in many, many videos, so I don't have too much to say. Besides, our morally gray hero in this one is Fausto, and he wants to marry Francesca off to his son, and so her father owes him, you know, and so he gives his daughter, who she's 18, and she has plans for her life, like, she knows her family's in the mafia, but she always thought she was going to get to live a normal life. Well, that was always a lie. And in fact, she was a bit foolish to think that she could have it any other way. But her father really let her do what she wanted. And now she's being forced to move to Italy and is supposed to marry Fausto's son. Well, there's a couple problems with that. Number one, Fausto's son is gay. And so he's going to marry her because he's supposed to. And if he were to out himself, it could mean death. And Frankie is determined not to marry this man, even though they become very good friends. It's something that I love about this series, is the relationship between Frankie and I think Gianni is the son. But through her defiance, she very much sparks an interest in Fausto. And pretty shortly into the book, like, it's not really a spoiler with this, Fausto decides, you know, I don't have to make her my son's wife. I can find a different wife for my son, someone who will be more biddable for him. I want to handle Frankie, and I think I'll just make her my mistress instead. So he's definitely a man who takes what he wants, and you'll see how that works out for him. I will say, as I say when I mention this, this was not my favorite book of the two. Like, the Mafia Darling is my favorite because Fausto has a very large grovel that he must do, but it's good stuff. And then the last book I want to mention, because I haven't been able to mention this book in a little while, and lately it's been getting a lot of attention, which just fills me with so much joy, because there's a couple book boxes that are doing special editions of this book, and it's amazing. I think maybe I'll link one of them down below, because you can still buy it. The Mystic Box, unfortunately, you're not going to get a copy of this from Mystic Box, but there's this new book box that's starting called, I think it's called the Embers something. They're doing a special edition of Sea of Ruin by Pam Godwin. Now, this book actually has 3 morally gray characters. One is Captain Ashley Cutler, who is Lord Ashley Cutler, who is a pirate hunter. And then we have Bennett Sharp, who is a female pirate, and her wayward husband, Priest, who she's actually been separated from for a couple years, but they're still married. And Lord Ashley is looking to hunt them down, and that's what he does. And so this book has very interesting entanglements between all 3 of them. For a good portion of this book, Bennett is a captive to Lord Cutler, and things get a bit dubious and a bit sexy in his cabin, because the only real safe place for her to be kept captive is in his rooms. You know, in the beginning of the book, not in the beginning, but in the beginning of her captivity, he puts her in the hold to show her how dangerous it will be if she was left with the other pirates and captives down below, so that she will be thankful for the safety of his room. But, whew, Lord Ashley, just because he is a pirate hunter for England does not mean he's a good man. So we'll see that. But anyway, there you go. There are 10 books with some morally gray characters in them. I hope you will give them a try. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and make sure you check out my playlist. I haven't mentioned this in a while. I have over 300. Is it at 300 now? I don't know, I'll have to check. Recommendation videos. I also have a playlist that is dark romance recs, or if you want historical romance recs, all of those are on my page. So make sure you're subscribed. I put up 4 videos a week. I also have a Patreon where if you would like exclusive content from me or behind the scenes interactions with me, you can check that out down below. Thank you so much for watching, friends. I'll see you next time.